Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of Discourse, TM. Today, we're talking about a comedy classic. Is it a comedy classic now? I guess it will be. I think you can only be considered a classic after, 20 years? I think if you're 20 years old, you're retro at this point. And so we'll say it's almost a comedy classic. I can say it's a beloved comedy, chat. Introduces to some very talented people, I think for the first time for a lot of us. But we are talking about Edgar Wright's Shaun of the Dead. And I'll say at the top, probably one of my favorite comedies of all time. It's definitely in my top 5, if not my top 3. Absolutely adore this movie. And before I kind of hand it off to other people, I just want to kind of go into how I originally saw this film. And I'm curious if everyone had like a similar experience to myself. And I did not see this movie in theaters. I feel like a lot of people did not initially see this film in theaters. Not that it wasn't a commercial or critical success when it first came out. It did very well. About $6 million budget, made $30 million, I think like internationally. Pretty good for a film like this. A small hit, if you will. But for myself, I originally saw this movie on Comedy Central back in the day when Comedy Central was just playing this on reruns all the time. And yeah, it was the edited version. So they took out all the cool stuff, all the swear words and sexual innuendo and most graphic things, of course. But I eventually, acquired the film on like DVD. I want to say like a couple of like months later, and saw in all of its gory, dry British glory, if you will. But it was kind of like a revelation for me because at the time, when I think about like what comedies was I into in the late 90s and early 2000s, and I have to say they were like stuff like Austin Powers. Like that was my thing. It was like International Man of Mystery and The Spy Who Shagged Me, which I thought was fucking hilarious. And to this day, I am afraid to go back and watch those. Goldmember's not great, but to this day, I'm still afraid to go back and watch those two films. Just because I'm like, they're probably not as funny as I think they are. Or like maybe something like the original Scary Movie or Scary Movie 2. Like those are the kind of things I was watching. A lot of those parody comedies at the time. That was like my comedic sensibilities. That's where they're leaning. But then with something like Shaun of the Dead, I felt like it elevated them. Or at least it exposed me to something new. And even it wasn't until like years later where I even had a greater appreciation for the film, not only because of its writing and its characters, but also even for some technical things, like the technical aspects of comedy and editing. I want to get into that with you guys in a bit. But when I initially saw it, even on TV, I remember just being captivated by it, and also watching Sci-Fi Channel original movies and things like that. So I was already into horror, and I was getting into that. But we'll start at the top. We'll start with we'll just go down the line. We'll pick and choose and go in actually whatever direction you want to go in. But Deadpool. Again, well, I want to welcome everyone actually to the show. Thank you, Deadpool, Ace Rock, Austin, Chris Ayers, Jacob, Kazfay, me, M. Xavier, and Vanny for joining me. I do appreciate you guys being here. Thank you. We got a nice, big, thick group of people, and I love that. But we'll start with Deadpool. How did you first see this movie? What was your initial reactions to Shaun of the Dead?
Well, my mom and my older brother were really into they liked horror movies and stuff like that, and like some of those comedies in that similar vein. So I saw it because of them.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was never a really big horror fan, and then they sat me down and made me watch it.
Yeah.
And like I mean, at first glance, like if you don't really know much about it, you think it's going to be just sort of like a horror movie. Then you realize, oh no, this is comedy kind of poking fun a little bit at the horror elements.
Very much so. It's like a deconstructive zombie film. Really. Was Shaun of the Dead your first horror comedy that you were exposed to?
I believe probably.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's really cool. So you didn't even watch like the stuff like the Scary Movie 1 or 2 at the time, which I feel like were out before Shaun of the Dead. I want to say they were out before Shaun of the Dead. So you didn't even watch like those or something?
Not really.
Interesting.
I was at the age where I wasn't I didn't care much for horror movies, and most comedies I was kind of mad about. So those I just kind of missed. I didn't see those until I was late teens, early adult.
Nice. Okay, cool. All right, there we go. Very interesting. Ace Rock, what about yourself? How did you first see this film, and what was your initial reactions to it?
So I believe I saw the. Hi everybody, and thanks for having me on. This is one of my favorite things to do. I saw it in the theater. and I saw it like one of those like smaller indie theaters. I grew up. There was a friend of mine who was funny. He just DM'd me out of the blue the other day. This kid who's English and turned me on to Monty Python at a like way too young age, and so like I grew up watching like The Life of Brian, Monty Python, The Holy Grail, Monty Python's The Meaning of Life. Like I clearly saw it way too young an age.
Yeah.
And so that shaped like my humor and outlook, and so I was always looking for like that dry British humor ever since then. And I was familiar with Simon Pegg, not too familiar with Edgar Wright. So like I recognized Simon Pegg and I was like, oh, I know that guy, he's funny, I want to see it. I didn't really know much about Edgar Wright at the time and that their relationship together. And when I watched it, I was expecting more of a comedy. And then immediately I was like, holy shit, this is like a really good horror film too.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I rank this as like one of those perfect movies.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think as a horror film, it works as a horror film and a gore fest. It's a great zombie movie. It also is, I think, just like a perfect comedy as well. So I love it. It's like in my top 5 favorite films of all time.
It's one of those films that manages to balance multiple tones. Because yes, obviously, I think it's primarily known as like a comedy, but it has those great horror elements. It has that gore and those practical effects. But it's also it's a great romantic film. It's a great film about a person having existential crisis, doesn't know what to do with their life. It's a good family drama. It has some emotional scenes in it, well, revolving around character deaths. And yeah, it to me, I'm right there with you, man. It's one of those films that has all these different genres mixed in and manages somehow, by some miraculous way, manages to balance them and make them all work in unison with each other, which is pretty incredible. Oscar, what about yourself, good sir?
So I didn't see this in theaters. I think at that point, I saw it like probably some point in high school. I actually watched it on Netflix. I was trying to remember if I saw this or if I saw Hot Fuzz first.
Interesting.
And
okay.
I think I saw Hot Fuzz first, and then I watched this movie because I loved Hot Fuzz so much. I'm like, okay, I'll check out the first one they made, and I did really enjoy it. And then we did a watch party for this sometime in like May or somewhat, and
a few months ago, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh man, this movie, and it kind of reminded me how emotional, how well choreographed and edited this movie is, and how great it is. And it was, even in my first time, I think kind of something we see, or I think the reason I watched it, or one of those, just that zombies are just such a big thing. And like, I want to say about 2008 to like 2015, like the first 5 years of the 2010s, there was just a lot of zombies, and it was all really good. Like we had The Walking Dead, we had, Left 4 Dead was still a big game.
Oh yeah, definitely.
The Last of Us, like I mean, that's not even really zombies, but like post-apocalyptic zombies were sort of like a big thing, and I think this movie was kind of like one of the precursors to that.
I feel like with I guess we can say zombies is a subgenre of horror. I suppose it is now at this point. It has been for quite some time. I always hear from people, oh, the zombies, they're dying out. The subgenre's dying out. And yet these films still persist. Maybe they range in quality, but I think there's always been like a huge zombie film for whatever decade or several. Since when we first saw like how we see zombies today. Like I'm not talking, voodoo zombies and shit, that kind of thing, which is what the word originally came from. I'm talking about like, Night of the Living Dead zombies. I feel like whether it be in the 60s or 70s, 80s and 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and probably into this decade now, we've always had something that has been very big, that has come from that subgenre. Whether it is in books like Max Brooks's World War Z, or video games. I count Last of Us as a zombie game. Those are zombie-esque. enemies. They're definitely inspired by zombie fiction, or even though I'm not the biggest fan of it, I mean the comic Walking Dead, which is great, which I do like a good portion of that comic, even though I'm not the biggest fan of the show. I mean that was huge. And so it's a genre that keeps iterating on itself and experimenting, deconstructing, doing new things. I think that's what's made it last for nearly 60 going on 70 years now. So it makes it pretty incredible. Chris, what about yourself? How did you first see this? What was your first initial reactions to it?
I when I first watched this movie, I would have been 12, maybe almost 13.
Baby boy.
Yeah. I'd seen a trailer for it on a Blu-ray of some other movie, and this was around the time where I was finally starting to get into horror. I was watching stuff like Evil Dead and Scream and whatnot, and I also this was back when Blockbuster was still around, and I managed to smuggle a lot of R-rated movies into my house that way, and Shaun of the Dead was one of them, and I watched it, and I absolutely loved it. I ate it up. I've watched it multiple times over the years, and it made me a fan of Edgar Wright for life, and it turned me on to the possibilities of what you can do with satire of particular genres.
It's funny that you bring up Edgar Wright. I'm curious because Edgar Wright, I mean, he was known obviously in the UK for his series Spaced, but I think like this film was the thing that really put him on the map for a lot of people, especially international audiences. Did anyone? I just question for anyone out there right now. Did anyone see Spaced before they saw Shaun of the Dead? Were they already aware of Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg through Spaced? Anyone in particular?
No, I think Shaun of the Dead is how I discovered Edgar Wright, and then after that, I looked for Spaced because I heard about it after this film.
Okay. I was just very, very curious about that because I know that was their big thing that initially got them going. And Nick Frost and a number of other actors even appear in Shaun of the Dead. So I was always curious about that. Yeah, like all of you guys. After I saw Shaun of the Dead, then I went back and I eventually watched Space. That was kind of like my trajectory, if you will.
I feel like almost the entire cast of the main characters from Shaun of the Dead are in Spaced.
I think yeah.
His girlfriend,
most of them are.
His girlfriend and the guy with the glasses are definitely in it as well.
Yes. Yeah, you're correct. Yeah, playing very different characters, which I think is cool. Jacob, Thunder Lee, how about yourself? How did you initially see this, and what were your initial reactions?
I'd say the first time I saw this film was in 2006. I was like 6 years old, and it was like I think it was Spike TV, like before Spike TV went down the drain years later.
Yeah, they showed this a lot on Spike. I remember.
Yeah. And I remember this because I was trying to watch my wrestling show. It was Thursday night, and I remember this specifically. I was trying to watch my wrestling show, and they showed it right before the show, and I saw the whole movie. I was like, this movie is really good. I really enjoyed it, and I hated horror at the time. This was like way before I started watching horror in middle school.
Right, exposed to it, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And like zombies at the time never scared me because they were just people, who just ate brains.
Sure.
So I watched this film and like I just had a connection with the film of how well it was made and how funny it was. And I never became a huge fan of Edgar Wright until I watched Scott Pilgrim. And when I found out that Edgar Wright was the one who did Shaun of the Dead, I was like, this man has always been good at directing and making good entertainment.
Sure, to your point earlier about talking how you weren't like a big horror fan, but this kind of got you into that, or at least exposed you to it. I feel like a lot of these kind of deconstructive films, these films that are kind of like critiques on the genre, are still reverent of it and love it, but are poking fun at it in a kind way. I feel like these are kind of gateway films for a lot of people. The same way where I think like looking at Scream in the 90s that's a great gateway film to a lot of slasher movies in the 70s and 80s, or what have you. Like you can think of any kind of deconstructive film and how it looks at a genre and maybe makes fun of the genre, but then it acts still as a way to like, oh, you can still appreciate it, and then you discover other films. I wonder if Shaun of the Dead, for a lot of people, is kind of like that zombie film, like they're like baby's first zombie film. and that's how they were eventually exposed to the subgenre. Cassie, what about yourself? How did you first see the movie and your initial reactions to it?
Well, the first time I actually saw the movie was just today.
Oh, wow.
But I had always, although I had heard of it before, and I had heard of the Three Flavors Cornetto trilogy before.
Yeah.
Like, I saw World's End when it was in theaters because people had been telling me about the trilogy.
Right.
But Shaun of the Dead, that was the movie that people had always recommended to me once I was allowed to see like horror movies and stuff. And I had been watching horror comedies that were more parodies of slashers like Scream, or I watched Bride of Chucky, which like, I don't know, like things like that. So this is the first, I think, comedic zombie film I've seen. And I will say that as much as I liked World's End, this was better. I feel like World's End was like a slightly different version of this.
That is so cool that you saw it for the first time. What you said today, right? You said today?
Yeah.
That's amazing. Wow. And you saw The World's End first. Have you seen if I just ask you, have you seen Hot Fuzz?
I haven't.
You haven't?
But I've heard of it.
Oh, you should.
No.
I would recommend you definitely. If you like Shaun of the Dead, then I recommend checking out Hot Fuzz. I am not. I'm actually. I know some people in the chat or some people you were here like The World's, and I'm not a big fan of it personally. I think that's probably the weakest entry. I just think it's kind of I don't know. Just I really didn't like the character. I think there's too many fucking characters in that movie, and I didn't care about them. But Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz, I think, really do get the characters right. There's a wholesomeness to both movies, and I think that wholesomeness is missing from something like The World's End. So that's really interesting that you saw that film first. But that's good that you still pursued and still went and watched these other movies. And listen, please do see Hot Fuzz. Have you seen Scott Pilgrim?
No.
I
haven't.
I would recommend checking that one out too. It's not connected to the Cornetto trilogy, but it's definitely directed. I mean, it's obviously directed by Edgar Wright. But I would say definitely check out Hot Fuzz. But that's so interesting that you saw them in such an odd order. I like that. I like that a lot. And Xavier, what about yourself, good sir? How did you first see this movie, and what were your initial reactions to it?
So I first saw this movie on TV.
Like me.
So
nice.
I saw it. I don't know which one I saw first, but I know back then, Shaun of the Dead was one like zombie film that I really liked. But I also liked Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead, 'cause I think they came out the same year, and so I just remembered those two like playing back to back all the time on TV. Like I think it was like Stars or something. But but one thing, I mean, I was watching it today because I rewatched it today, and I was thinking, I really like this movie, but I can't like point out like why I really like it. I just think it's just a good movie, and I think it's like fun to watch, and there's nothing like about it that really like irks me in any way. So yeah, I really like the movie, and also it was one of the first movies that like introduced me to that whole British scene. Like I know you were talking about space before, but like I'd never heard of Edgar Wright, never heard of Simon Pegg or anybody, so it's really good in that way too.
I'm interested to know if this was anyone's like first. I mean, yes, I know Ace Rock. You had said earlier that your first exposure to British humor, or older British humor, was like through Monty Python and Monty Python, Holy Grail, The Life of Brian, and those kind of films and shows. I guess I have two things when I typically think of my exposure to British humor, and it's this movie. Definitely this one, because I saw stuff like Monty Python when I was older, a little bit older after this. And the other one was, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this, because I know I'm speaking to a lot of babies here, by the way. My God, you guys are so young hearing you guys talk about, I saw this when I was 6. I'm like, what? Like, I don't know, I was 12 or 13 when I saw this movie. But,
dude, I was like 20. I was like 20 or 25 when I saw this movie.
Where Vanny, Ace Rock, and myself can be the old men of this particular stream.
Hey, I'm only a year younger than you.
There you go.
I can't say nothing. I'm 22 right now.
Yeah, well, a bunch of babies. But my other exposure to British humor was a show called Keeping Up Appearances. Does anyone know what that show is?
Not at all.
No.
It's fantastic. I guess Mr. Bean as well. I watch a lot of Mr. Bean,
Oh.
but someone who's listening to this is like, I know what you're talking about, Chris, and thank you, individual person who's watching this or listening to this. Basically, it's about this well-to-do kind of upper middle class couple, and where the wife is very domineering and like the whole neighborhood hates her, but she's completely oblivious to that because she's so in control, and she's always trying to increase her status in society. And she plays the character of Hyacinth Bouquet. Her name is actually spelled Bucket, but her name is Bouquet, and it's a really funny British sitcom that came out like I want to say like the early 90s or something. But that my mom watched it all the time, and because my mom watched it, I watch all the time. And it was Hyacinth Bouquet, and it was Shaun, of course, Shaun the Dead.
There are other shows that I think share a lot of similar DNA.
Yes,
with Shaun of the Dead. White Dwarf, which is kind of has very similar vibes to Mystery Science Science Theater 3000,
and
also The Young Ones, which is like it's difficult to explain, but if you go back and look up The Young Ones, it's like East London dirtbags.
Right.
Living in poverty in like the 80s, and that definitely if you go back and watch those shows, you will definitely see a lot of the same sort of like DNA that you see in the Cornetto trilogy.
It's funny, like you bring up these shows, and like I haven't heard of some of these. Like some people obviously here have not heard of Cuba Appearances, or like how we brought up like Squid Games like off mic earlier. And it's interesting to me, like there are so many shows and movies and programs from all over the world, from all these different countries that we've just never seen. Could be excellent, amazing. Could be potentially some of our favorite things we ever watched. But there's such a glut of content out there. They'll probably never end up seeing it. I think it's kind of just like that's always been very interesting to me. There's that's why now people are watching something like Parasite, like I mentioned earlier, like just South Korean cinema and in TV, and how it's like, hey, these are like two examples, but there's probably all sorts of other things that are just as good as these other things as well. So it's just crazy that we're just limited in what we can watch. I mean, and that's what it is. Like I know enough to be able to see all these things because we're all busy. We're all doing things. We all have lives. There's so much content out there for people to peruse and watch at their own leisure. Vanny, what about yourself, good sir? How did you first see this, and what were your initial reactions to Shaun the Dead?
So I saw it in the theaters and was so excited when it was first announced. Like I grew up on a lot of the British humor. Like I loved Mr. Bean, I loved Monty Python, and this just hit everything I've been wanting into a film. Just that dry humor and the performances, everything. It just absolutely nailed it. So I saw it in the theaters as soon as it came out on DVD, picked it up there. It's one of the few films where I've watched like the behind the scenes, like director's commentaries or like the fun facts throughout it. Like I never watched or listened to those kinds of things, but I was so enamored with this film, and it's still one of my favorites. Like I have my Cornetto trilogy posters. I still watch these films on a regular basis. I do agree. I think World's End is by far its weakest, but I'm one of those defenders where I can see what they're trying to go for. And it does have a different tone, but Shaun of the Dead is it's the gift that keeps on giving. Like there's always another Easter egg. There's always another way to interpret like the ending. Like I hope we about the ending quite a bit because I have some thoughts on it, but
sure, of course.
It's borderline a perfect film. And from a technical standpoint, from how to do foreshadowing, like how to drop like very subtle, but very, very funny hints. It's amazing. And I still quote it to this day. I still say, "You've got red on you."
You've got red on you. And so I ran it under code tap. There's just certain things that there's so many iconic lines and moments. And you're right, Edgar Wright, and I guess Simon Pegg as well, because they did co-wrote it. They wrote this movie together. Like they're so good at the foreshadowing and just layering in jokes. And it's the kind of thing that it's rare to see this happen. Because it's like we're going to repeat a joke and it becomes funnier as it goes
Right.
along. Like sometimes like you just beat that fucking shit in the ground. Like I get it. I'm just not fun anymore. But at least in this, I could say in this movie and definitely in Hot Fuzz, I think also in Scott Pilgrim as well. At least those are the ones I can think of where they do repeat something over and over and over again, and it becomes more and more funny because the scenario has become more ridiculous.
Right.
And that's what we're talking about the writing. Like, I want to also just kind of touch on the technical aspects of this film in a bit. But also just want to kind of talk about the cultural impact briefly. I mean, had anyone seen a cricket bat before this movie? I hadn't. And yet now a cricket bat is in every zombie game. It's in Left 4 Dead, Left 4 Dead 2. It's like, yeah, give me the cricket bat, Shaun the Dead. Like the how this movie is permeated pop culture, how it still remains in the pop culture zeitgeist is incredible. Does anyone have any thoughts on just like the cultural impact, or do you see now like Shaun the Dead being referenced in other material?
I think Shaun of the Dead is one of those movies that literally gives you like, oh look, a cricket bat, well here it is in like 30 other zombie games, or like a pub that that ends up being a level in a zombie game, like
Right.
it, and it's trying to reference a lot of George Romero films.
Very much so.
Oh yeah.
And so like we was just playing Back for Blood the other night, and the jukebox, the whole jukebox mission,
There it is. You're right.
Literally like reminded me of Shaun of the Dead. Like, oh look, the jukebox is literally bringing the whole horde, and like I felt like that was a reference to Shaun of the Dead, even though in the movie it was Queen, and I don't even know what was the song that was playing in Back for Blood.
Why is Queen playing? It's on random. Yeah, no, you're right. I completely missed that. It's just so commonplace because the thing is, you're right. Because Shaun of the Dead has had such a cultural impact, and you have seen it referenced in all these different ways, whether it be in video games or whether it be in novels or comics or other movies, that now it's this commonplace. It's like, oh, of course it is, and you don't even think about it. Go ahead, Deadpool.
Left 4 Dead 2 also has the jukebox reference. There's one level where you trigger the jukebox.
Yeah.
It plays whatever that band that's referenced in the game. It plays one of their songs. The Night Riders, or whatever they're called.
Oh, is it Night Riders? That's it. Okay.
Yeah, it plays their song and then attracts the horde.
Nice. Yeah, so there you go. I completely forgot about that. Again, it's just commonplace.
The song they're playing, the Queen song they're playing in Shaun of the Dead is "Don't Stop Me Now."
Mm-hmm.
Kill the Queen,
which is so and I love how they actually get in sync with the song, with the action. That's one of the technical aspects of this movie I really appreciate. I mean, there's a lot. Like you just look how even like Edgar Wright edits. Like the editing is funny, but I just love that scene. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, but you bring that up, and it made me think of Baby Driver, which is like one giant music video that Edgar Wright did, and like that whole scene with the song is almost like a little music video in the middle of that movie.
Yeah, that's the thing Edgar Wright does throughout all of his movies. Mm-hmm. It's a thing called Mickey Mousing, and I learned this because I took sound classes where they taught me this. Where the action you're seeing on screen is synced up to the music that's playing over that scene, and that's something that happens throughout all of Edgar's movies.
And I love that. I typically like that from him. There's somewhere. And I guess it's something like Baby Driver. Like I can appreciate it more the story structure of that movie bothers me. But I do like that about his editing and how he incorporates music into his films. Like that is pretty good. Any other thoughts? Just the cultural impact on this. I mean, some of you guys remind me of shit I completely forgot about, or just have become just like of course it's in this. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. There was one cool thing that I noticed, that obviously Shaun of the Dead is in reference to Dawn of the Dead and the whole George Romero series. After Shaun of the Dead came out, there was Land of the Dead, and Nick Frost and Simon Pegg made a cameo in that.
Right.
Yeah.
I've always heard that, but I've never seen that scene.
Yeah, they're the paintball zombies.
Oh, okay.
There's a scene in it where there's somebody's like song where you can shoot paintballs at the zombies. They're the zombies getting shot at.
Oh, see. Oh God. Wow. No,
is Land of the Dead is that the one with John Leguizamo and
that's the one.
Yeah.
Yep.
I
And
feel like
how
I've seen that movie.
I saw
I
it
walked
once
out
at
of
the
the theater
draft
in
house.
that one.
You walk out of the theater. I heard
I
it.
walked out of the theater in that movie.
I think I've seen. You know what? I know what it is. It was on TV. That was a movie that was on TV like a lot, like on FX or something. One of those channels, Sci-Fi. And I'd only catch certain chunks of it, and it would always be like the last third of the movie. Like I don't know how the fucking film begins. I don't know what the setting is or what's going on. So
I feel like most of the time, if we ever click on a movie on a TV channel, it's always gonna end up being the last third of the film.
Mm-hmm.
does anyone still have that? That's interesting you bring that up. Does that happen to anybody? Because I don't have cable anymore, so that never happens to me. Like everything is just from the beginning nowadays.
There's a lot of Twitch streams that do always on. Like Shout Factory has their own always on, where they're showing old movies and basically all the stuff they own. They just throw it up there. So sometimes I'll pop up there and there'll be like a movie in mid progress or something.
Okay.
Like that.
Yeah. No, that's a good modern example. Go ahead.
For me, I have my TV has like this free TV thing, streaming service thing for free. And I would always have it on like the horror movie channels, and like it would be like a random B horror film, but I would just have it on the climax of the film just showing up. It was like, oh, I wish I would have seen this movie in full.
Yeah, sure, of course. No, at least, but hey, we live in a time now where it's become a lot easier. Casper, do you have something to say?
Well, I was just gonna say this is probably a bit obvious, but I think Zombieland took a lot from Shaun of the Dead. I have only seen clips of the Zombieland movies, but it's what kept popping into my head when I was watching it.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I was gonna suggest, I was just talking about what Edgar Wright films we should see, but you should definitely see Zombieland. The first one especially, because I think that one is great, and you're totally right. It does take a lot of, because much like Shaun of the Dead, that is also a very deconstructive film. It looks at the zombie genre, still indulges in it and its tropes and things, but also points certain things out, like the double tap. It's like, it might be down, but make sure to check, make sure to go ahead and just for good measure. So it has a lot of that in there. So definitely, I mean, there's been other comedies that have obviously been influenced by Shaun of the Dead, other zombie comedies, that I think is great.
You reminded me, Chris. I forgot about this. In the Phineas and Ferb, I think near the end they did a big zombie episode. They got Simon Pegg, they got Nick Frost, and they got because he was alive, George Romero, all to be in it and to be animated.
I've only watched like some clips of Phineas and Ferb. I'm like, this show looks really fucking funny. There's a lot of just, it just has that kind of dry humor, but also being very goofy at the same time. And I was like, if I watched this show, I'd probably be a big fan. I've only watched clips of it, but I have seen those images of animated Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. I didn't even know George Romero was in that. That's pretty cool. So there you go. Even in cartoons, this R-rated zombie comedy is now in children's cartoons, which goes to show. I mean, so many of you guys today have mentioned you saw this film when you were very, very young, which I guess I did too. But I feel like I was running my, maybe 12 or something when I first, and it was on television too. So they toned down certain things. So that's another great example about the cultural impact of the film. I also want to take a brief moment to, we kind of already did already, but Edgar Wright in general. Yes, we already knew about space and things, or some of us, some of us have not. But I think for a lot of us, this was our first introduction to him as a filmmaker. Is he to this day? Are you always still interested in the next thing that he's going to do? Because I'll speak honestly for myself. I love Shaun of the Dead. I think I love Hot Fuzz even more. Someday I definitely want to do a discussion on that one. And I'm a big fan of Scott Pilgrim. When before he did The World's End, he did Scott Pilgrim, which I think is a super underrated comedy. It didn't do particularly well when it came out. Got most mixed to positive reception from critics. But it did not do well box office wise. And it was still years later being assessed and reanalyzed. And it's like, oh yeah, people are like, of course it's a classic now, or it's an underappreciated comedy. But and I really do like his structure of films and the pacing, especially of his early work, where I always think about it was like the YouTube video. I don't know how to credit this individual, what this person's name was, but it was about editing styles and the comedy of editing. And
I think it was.
You know what I'm talking about?
every frame of painting. I think
that's it. I think that sounds familiar. I think that's right. All credit goes to that guy or that group, where he compared like the editing style of Edgar Wright. The transitions, how he go from scene to scene. Like in particular, it was for Shaun of the Dead. It was like Shaun's breakfast or something. How it would do all these fucking quick cuts in the coffee until eventually in his clothes, and then he would go to like work and stuff, and then it would slow down and we would be in the scene. But it was like this really fast-paced transition that was still very comedic and going like, oh, it was fun. Or like in Hot Fuzz when the character of Nick Angel, Simon Pegg's character, is going from England to like this small British country town. And it was that quick cut with him getting his luggage, him grabbing his plant, him at the train station, the train going by, like all these really things. And they compared it to like a typical comedy. It was like Ryan Reynolds. It was like a Ryan Reynolds, Sandra Bullock comedy called The Proposal. And it's this super generic editing where it's like, let's just see New York City or like, the United States. And I was like, wow. And it really shows you like that makes the difference. Where you have someone where you're thinking, oh yeah, transition, whatever, who cares? But when it really does, you could do so many creative things with that, and he so often does that. Even if I can't say I'm like the biggest fan of some of his recent work, like I'm not the biggest fan of, the World's End or something like Baby Driver. But I just want to talk a minute about Edgar Wright. Is there anything that you guys really appreciate about him, or do you want to bring up about him and give the man his credits?
I was gonna say that. What was I gonna say? I was gonna say that. Even though I haven't seen all of Edgar Wright's movies, I think just from this movie and then also Scott Pilgrim, every time I see his name, I'm just like, my ears perk up. It's like, oh, maybe this is a movie that I might be interested in seeing. And also, it's not common, or at least for me, like where you have been able to see the trajectory of a filmmaker's career, because I saw his first movies, or I saw one of his first things, Shaun of the Dead, and so
yeah,
I've at least like heard of like his other stuff as well.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Anyone else like in regards to like just Edgar Wright, his career, what you like about him, what you dislike about him? Just speak freely.
I love like the shots that he chooses in all of his movies, because it's like he has subtle references, including in both Scott Pilgrim and Shaun of the Dead. Like there's subtle references, like the scene of the guy passing out when Shaun was riding the bus, and then that would eventually turn into like the zombie thing. Like there's a lot of sort of reference, and one of my favorite parts about it is the intro, like the song intro, the goofy song intro.
Bum 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 bum.
Yeah. Like this, it's a whole like choreographed, in my opinion.
Yeah,
but
it is. Yeah,
it was like a subtle reference, like these people are gonna turn into zombies.
I mean, it's that classic George Romero. Like, we were already zombies to begin with. That's what the culture. We're all about consumerism, and they're all going to the mall because they were spending all their time just buying things and eating things and wasting their lives. And so they're going to what was familiar to them. So, and he obviously has that in this film as well.
I put, I think the consensus is that Baby Driver and World's End are his weakest entries.
I'm speaking for myself. A lot of people do love those movies, but
I don't disagree with you. However, I will say, comparatively speaking to the majority of films out there, they're still really good films, and they're still really well crafted films. And I think one of the things I love about Edgar Wright, and he's someone whom, if his name's attached, I'm interested in seeing what it's about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I almost place him in the same sort of category. I would consider him an auteur at this point. Similar in vein to like Denis Villeneuve or Christopher Nolan, but for his own very, his own niche in different genres. But the thing that I really appreciate about Edgar Wright is that every shot has a purpose.
Yeah,
and every shot is composed, and also the importance of music in his films. The music choice and the soundtracks are very carefully thought out, and they're all placed like with reason, and there's meanings on multiple levels. So even if you have films that are basically comedies that are goofy on its superficial level, there's still a lot going on with them that make them interesting to watch again and again and to discuss on different levels. So I respect him as a filmmaker. I think he's a tremendous filmmaker of his generation.
Him and Tarantino have something in common where they so often make, I mean, you hear this, like the score, the soundtrack is a character in a Tarantino movie. And, no, it is. I mean, you remember everyone remembers the soundtrack to Pulp Fiction. You remember the soundtrack, the score, whether it be for good or ill, and something like Django Unchained. But I think Edgar Wright does, he takes necessary steps where it all fits and it doesn't become too meta at the same time. It's just good for the scene itself, where it's funny, you know what they're doing, but it's just on every level, on an emotional level and a comedic level, like the score and the music he picks does work really well. And that's across the board, I think, in a lot of his films, whether or not I like some of them or not, like that's always very consistent with him. So I agree. Any other thoughts from anyone else in regards to Edgar Wright?
When you think of like Shaun of the Dead specifically, because you bring up Tarantino is such a good point, because I think where Tarantino is so in your face with all the culture references and just how up his own ass he can be at times. He's still a good filmmaker, and there's a lot of it I do like. But I think where Edgar Wright does it, I think he does the same job just differently. Because Shaun of the Dead is just full of Easter eggs for other horror films, but they're so much more subtle. And to the earlier points, like every shot matters, and he can make even the most mundane thing of like when you see Shaun taking out the milk, making his toast with such fast cuts. Like he was one of the first directors I've ever noticed and can appreciate on a technical level, and also having the energy and having all this inside jokes and references to older stuff, but not being pretentious about it either. And it's pretty brilliant, and he makes this stuff look so effortless too.
No, I agree with you. He's just very subtle about it.
Yeah,
like it'll be in the background, like it'll always be there. You always see it, and you won't get on the first viewing, the second viewing, but you start to notice certain things. Like the humor in this movie, in a lot of his films, is super layered, and I like that. And it's where you're right, where you can watch in a multiple viewings and get something out of it, something new each time, which I think is the reason why these films have just permeated our pop culture for so long. Anyone? Go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, you're right. He specifically designs his movies to be watched multiple times so you can discover something new each time, and that's what I love about him. Like not just his filmmaking, but his storytelling is so carefully and specifically constructed. Where, like, yeah, you're right. Everything has a purpose. Like, you'll get lines that seem like they're nothing at first, and then later on something will happen and you'll realize, oh, that line from earlier was a setup so that we could get this payoff that's going on right now, and it's fucking awesome.
Yeah, fully agree. Go ahead.
So you guys are making the comparison between Edgar Wright and Tarantino, but I always felt he's more like almost a toned down version of Wes Anderson. Because if you look at Edgar Wright's work, he has a very specific style on how he constructs scenes, how he does pacing and film work. And it always reminds me, like I said, a toned down version of Wes Anderson. Like with both, you can see their fingerprints all over the movie. Like if you take an Edgar Wright movie, and you've never seen it before, no one told you it was Edgar Wright movie, you don't know anything about it. It wouldn't take you too long to start to pick up, hey, wait, I think this is an Edgar Wright movie. And to kind of build off what you guys were just saying, the Cornell trilogy is a masterclass in foreshadowing. Like each of those movies, the beginning of the movie, he sets up. I mean, every little thing he sets up pays off at the end.
There's even just you're right. We keep mentioning the foreshadowing, and that is one of the things he's most skilled at creating and developing. And like I always code, I was gonna, eventually I just want to talk about like our favorite scenes. Just go down the line, have each of you pick something, we can deconstruct them. But I always think about like the scene where Shaun, like he goes to the shop to pick up like it's the morning and he's tired and he goes, picks up the Coke, and like everyone's doing their thing and everything, outside. And then he does the same exact thing the next day, but he doesn't fucking notice it's like it's the zombie apocalypse happening outside because he's so into his own routine. And it's like all these little things that it's like, oh, wow, look at that. But certain people are still doing like the same things, but as zombies, or like on these fucked up versions, but he's so completely out of it, he doesn't even notice. It's like, it's so rewarding to see like the same scene again, except with these certain changes. And he so often does that in a lot of his films. Like there's repetition, but there's always like a subtle change with the repetition each time until it becomes something very, very different. Any other last minute, like, just points about Edgar Wright people want to emphasize?
Okay.
All right, Casfay, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, building off what you were saying about the subtleties and everything, I just love some of the, I think there are at least 2 shots of when Shaun's like getting out of bed and stuff and walking around, and it like the camera focuses on his legs while he's groaning or something, and it's very zombie like. And I loved how that played into the foreshadowing.
It's that great. Yeah. It's that, like George Romero, where we just live this kind of like mundane trance-like existence where we're just doing the same thing every day and becoming zombies. So you're totally right. Austin, did you have something you wanted to say?
Oh yeah, I just really wanted to talk about Scott Pilgrim because I think some of you guys know is that I'm from Toronto, and that movie's basically set pretty much where I live, and I think that's why it holds a special place in a lot of people's heart, because it just kind of references things that even if you lived in Canada, you still wouldn't exactly get it. Like they have a shot where they're in Pizza, and you can see it's this old store that's like kind of a piece of shit, but it's called Honest Ed's. It's like very brightly lit, but it's like a pretty crappy store inside. And now it's like gone and just condos, and you can see Casa Loma. There's a Aubrey Plaza works in a country style. That's it. Which is not even like Tim Hortons. It's like the shittier Tim Hortons
right
coffee shop. But like it's Toronto and like Canada in general is always used in so many shows as New York or whatever. But it's just something so beautiful that you gotta see your hometown like represented in that way, and shot so well. And he does so many different like locations and details that like you could rack, and a lot of them are still there, and a lot of them you can still go see, and I don't know, I think it's why it holds like a really special place in my heart as a movie.
That's how I feel like with the hometown stuff. That's how I feel with the Joker, because that movie was filmed in the Bronx, which is hilarious, because it's like the step scene that you've seen in
the dance
that's a terrible place to go to, which is, I've been there for experience, and like
has been gentrified now.
No. It's like,
oh, okay.
It's because the Bronx is known for like crime and stuff, but like I've been there personally. I've seen like certain things happen. It's like, but it's cool to see like the Bronx, being shown in movies.
Of course.
Like it's the same way with like, I know if everybody saw like, I don't know, Queens or something like that, or
like Queens and Spider-Man,
or like
Homecoming,
or Houston, like certain spots. Like I think everybody will feel the same way.
No, I both of you bring up good points. Anytime we see something that's familiar, and it's like, oh yeah, I do that, and how it's represented, I think is cool. Like I think Edgar Wright, I think for a lot of people, especially people of our generation who do not live in the UK, specifically do not live in England, or like one of these kind of villages or towns in England, it's kind of our first exposure to them. And when we hear from people like Osnick, who just brought up how, like, clearly, like with that's our exposure to British culture and like, pubs and things. Like, I feel like that's the first movie I ever heard like a bar called a pub. Probably, maybe I've heard it like in other movies and things, but I remember just like pub culture is explored in that movie. Even the little treats that they eat, which are probably things that everyone, yeah, of course, oh yeah, of course, I know exactly what those peanuts, those little candies that they eat in the movie. But like, I like what you brought up, Austin, where he specifically is referencing Canadian culture and cuisine and everyday life. So he clearly does his research for these locations that he shoots at. And he shows his love for these areas by referencing these things, not like making obvious, references, but just like he's just being very subtle about it. It's like, of course they would showcase that coffee shop. Of course they would showcase this particular pizzeria because that's what everyone would go to in Toronto. And I think that's what makes him very special as a filmmaker.
And just like he takes, because Scott Pilgrim, it's based on a graphic novel. He takes like the panels and the story from that, and he just puts it in live act. It's like, people forget it is like a graphic novel, but he just takes that and he shoots it in such a way that it looks like it is real, but you can still get the video game kind of comic-esque nature of it.
Oh yeah, he nails that, and especially in something like Scott Pilgrim. Yeah, the way, that's probably one of the best. It's not a video game adaptation, but it kind of is. It's very a video game-esque movie. You're right.
That's why I'm kind of excited for his new movie, Last Night in Soho, because I really want to see like how he uses it's in London, right? So
yeah, it's like 1960s London, or at least part of the movie is.
So I want to see how much of that environment in London that he could like show off.
Yeah, just recreate and show appreciation towards. No, yeah, that's a good point. So that's probably going to be the most positive aspects of the film, at least something to really look forward to in regards to Last Night in Soho. But I did want to move on from Edgar Wright. Obviously still reference him and talk about him, but I do want to talk about specifically some of the characters in the movie. It's like, yes, this is named after Shaun, the titular character with Shaun the Dead, but we do have a big cast of characters. But I did want to just briefly focus on, get everyone's opinions on the dynamic and the friendship between, Simon Pegg's Shaun and Nick Frost's Ed character, where, I love them as a duo. Their rapport is fantastic. There's so many scenes with them. Like you can tell, you could tell, like, just seeing this movie, that Simon Pegg and Nick Frost are such good friends because they have that instantaneous chemistry, the way they can just bounce off each other. Even when the body language is just so close to each other. And I just really like that about them. And where you can really go in depth and say, like, yes, Ed is also kind of holding back Shaun at the same time, not having a move on with his life, but at the same time, I just love that dysfunctional dynamic between them. Even when we see them come to a head and Shaun criticizing Ed later in the film, but I just love them in the movie. I think, like, and also we see them in Hot Fuzz again. I think that dynamic is in full force, maybe even better. But what's just everyone's opinions on Shaun and Ed's relationship in this movie? Because for me, it's one of those perfect comedic duos.
Same. It feels real. It feels like a very real friendship. They've known each other for so many years, and they can still fight a little bit too. Like, especially when shit gets really bad and Ed is still being a bit selfish, and you see that tension, but then it's like everything's forgiven, like the next scene, like you would with your real friends too. So it's not like a perfect relationship. I actually think it's more of that Shaun and Ed just feed off of each other. So like that's kind of one of the points of Shaun of the Dead's theming, is that Shaun keeps himself down. Shaun never has a plan, and Ed just goes, yeah, that's fine. I'm cool with that. And like they kind of feed into each other's friendship, and it happens. Like everyone has a friend like that who just like you just have like this great chemistry, and you can argue and then forgive each other instantly and pretend like it never happened.
That's a great point. And like you say that on full display throughout the film. Like even when Liz breaks up with Shaun and Ed is just trying to make him feel better, like when they're at the bar. Yeah. It's funny because a lot where he's just like going over the denizens of the bar, and it's funny because you think this like movie had like a lot of improv, and there is, but this scene was completely improv'd by Nick Frost and Simon Pegg, like with Nick, that is Simon Pegg genuinely laughing in Nick Frost's descriptions, and like, he wants to see monkey, and he's doing the whole gorilla, where the fuck it is. And
I love that scene so much.
It's so good. It's wholesome.
I had no idea that was improv because it doesn't feel like improv. So you
Yeah.
telling me that it's improv, like, yeah, that's a surprise, and it's a pleasant one.
It really didn't. I thought it was like part of the script, and then I read the script like not that long ago. I'm like, oh, it's not in there.
Yeah.
Like that whole scene feels like it's just two friends talking, which
Yeah.
is cool.
That's why I think the dynamic works so well. And even like when you talk about them like feeding off each other, Vanny, and you're right, how you even like you have the fart joke between the two of them. And he's
Shaun.
like, I'm sorry, Shaun.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
For
And
what?
then
No,
he's like,
I'm
what? It's like, stop it. I'll stop doing it when you stop laughing. How
I'm not laughing.
I'm not like, yeah, I know. Where they have that in the beginning of the movie, and then at the very end, where it's taken a fart has taken on new meaning. It shows the connection between, which is incredible. Like, usually fart jokes in a movie is like, oh, give me a break. But again, it's the subtleness of the fart, if you will, which makes it so good.
The fart is not the star; it's the reaction.
Exactly. We don't hear. See, I feel like in an American movie, we would go.
You would hear
like
it.
that, and
Oh,
then
yeah.
be like, but it's a silent one. You're right. It's their reactions to it.
Yep.
Which
This
makes
is
it so
this
good.
and Swiss Army Man are the two movies to make farts meaningful.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
True story.
Those are very loud though in Swiss Army Man. But you're right.
But yeah,
Farts are important. There are emotional farts in Swiss Army Man.
Yeah.
Any other? Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
My
just gonna
favorite scene. Oh, go ahead, Cassie. Sorry.
You can go ahead, Kesve.
Oh, I was just gonna say that's what I love about good movie bromances is that the most heartwarming moments can come out of some of the grossest moments.
Sure. Yeah. It works for this case. Because I feel like when I think of like a lot of raunchy comedies and they have like a fart joke, I'm trying to think what's a good fart joke. And I'm sure there's ones I've laughed at, but like that. But what's the one that's wholesome? And I don't think there's any except for that one. And it's that I don't know. Maybe it's that great bro relationship that's added on top to it, that makes it work so well. But yeah, Ace Rock. Sorry. Go ahead, Vanny.
But I was just saying, it just adds to their chemistry too. In this case, literally chemistry. But yeah, just the fact that they've been friends for so long, they can still do fart jokes. It's still funny. And it just kind of goes into. I think kind of one of the earlier points that you made was like after Liv breaks up with him, and they're at the bar. I think if there wasn't such a base friendship already established there, they could have very easily had it where Ed is still on like that pinball machine, not really paying attention, or he's just on his phone. But you can see Shaun's in pain, and there's Ed right there, genuinely trying, like, "Hey, talk to me. What's going on?" And then they're doing the back and forth. So even though Ed's and Shaun's relationship is toxic, there's still love there too, and they do mean well for each other. It's just neither one of them want to grow up at this point.
In a lesser comedy, Ed would just be the comic relief constantly, consistently, and unlikable. But you would just resent him. He'll be like in a lesser movie, he'd be played by Zach Galifianakis, and you'd be like, you're just fucking weird, and I'm just sick of you. But because Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg and Nick Frost's performance, but what's written for him and Nick Frost, just the how he makes Ed such an emotional character, and where he literally is, he just wants it. Like, yeah, he fucks up, and he's aloof, but like he always tries to be by his friend's side when he needs him at like his darkest moment, and that's what makes him so much fun to be around. He's like, I wish I had that kind of friend, or a friend like that.
What about Josh?
Yeah, well, but Josh doesn't fart at me. He doesn't fart at me, man. I don't recall anything. I know he might be doing that all the time. Nia Brownie does that apparently.
Josh is going to listen to this now. You want me to fart for you now?
Yeah.
Ed's a fuck up, but you can tell his heart's always in the right place. And it reminds me of something that one of the writers from The Simpsons said about how they wrote Homer. This was back in the day before Homer just became a full-on moron and an asshole, where they basically wrote him like a dog. Or like a dog will fuck up, it will destroy shit, and you'll get mad at it, but you forgive it later because you know that the dog loves you and doesn't really mean to do any harm. And yeah, that's basically Ed. He's like a big dog in this.
Great comparison. That's a very good comparison. Yeah, I like that. Now, of course, other than Shaun and Ed, we do have other characters in the film. Although but we do have the character of Liz, who I think people often think about Shaun the Dead. They always gravitate towards Simon Pegg and Nick Frost for obvious reasons because they have the most screen time, of course. But I really do like the Liz character, played by famously by Kate Ashfield, and she has a great rapport with Simon Pegg. Like even like that initial scene in the bar where you know that it's the kind of couple where has been like together. What did they say in the movie? Like 7 fucking years, and they've been at this same point for 7 years, and so there's so much history, and I like that she's kind of become exasperated. And even like her little thing, there's like little things again. It's like okay, it's all about Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, but they still give each of the actors something funny. Like I like her whole like bye, which I reference to this fucking day. Any thoughts on the Liz character?
I feel she's a really cool twist on the straight man. Like
yes.
It's a woman, so you gender swap the straight man, but it's also like she does it in a way that's like not obnoxious. It's like as with everything else in the film, it skirts and flirts very dangerously with being obnoxious or like surly, but always remains earnest. I completely understand why Liz would be just fed up with Shaun's shit. As much as I love Shaun.
Yeah.
She is completely justified in feeling the way she feels.
I agree with you. And it's interesting because I think in a lesser film, they would have just made her the quote unquote bitch character. Yeah. It's like she's just oh, come on, why you gotta be the stick in the mud? She could have been that with worse writers or a worse filmmaker at the helm. But for myself, and I obviously for a lot of people here, they don't make her that. They do. You understand how she feels, how she just doesn't want to be like. I love her like as when they go to what was it when they go to at the Winchester the first time when she just doesn't want to like go to this bar every single day until she eventually drinks herself. Like drinks herself to death. And I thought it's funny, but it's also incredibly fucking morbid because Shaun also recognizes like that's probably what's going to happen to me if I keep this up. And it's one of those serious moments in the film. That's when we see like, Shaun tell Ed that. And Ed's doing the friend thing where he's like, "Oh, fuck her," and everything. But you realize, nah, she's right though in the end because that's what will happen.
And when she breaks up with Shaun, it's not because of anything like. It's not for like selfish reasons. Like her reasons for breaking up with him is that she's trying to actively help him improve his life and become a better person that he can be, but he doesn't commit to anything. Mm-hmm. That's his problem. She knows he's a good person. She knows that he has a lot of potential, but he's just stuck in a rut and he just can't seem to pull himself out of it. And that's why she broke up with him.
Yeah. Fully agree.
Yeah.
Cassie, you have something to say about Liz?
I was just gonna say I sympathize with her a lot, especially like what you were saying about how she feels like she's gonna drink herself to death and she's stuck in a rut. And I also her dynamic with Shaun is very good because whenever they fight, you can tell, like, because they started fighting about the bar and about how he didn't make those reservations, and that's basically the tipping point for their breakup. But I feel like the way the scene was written and directed, they did a good job of showing it's not just about the restaurant, it's not just about the bar. And she has a backbone no matter how bad things get. Like when Shaun starts talking about them like they're a couple again, she's like, whoa, wait a minute. You said this was bigger than you and me. I thought this was about survival.
Right, exactly. Yeah, no, I mean, you sense the history between them. I mean, that's there in full display. It's just another thing. She's like, I'm going to give it one last chance. And he's just, okay. It's just going to keep coming up. Cats, I will say your mic kind of going in and out for like a second each time. I don't know if you just want to adjust the settings on that. Just want to let you know.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I'm not sure what's going on with it. And I think there's a delay as well, but I don't know how to figure out with it.
Okay. No, it's no problem. I just want to make you aware of it. So yeah, no issue, of course. It's fine. Any other thoughts on Liz before we move on to some of the other characters?
I also thought like her rapport with all the other characters was really well done. Like not just with Shaun, but like her scenes with Ed, with her friends, with Shaun's mom. Like it just all really like had really good chemistry to it.
No, you do get the sense that like they even say we've been friends at least since college, and like when we have like she lives with her flatmates. Diane and David, who's just such a little shit. Of all the characters, we'd like fuck David. All right, he gets what he goddamn deserves. So underhanded, who obviously he's in love with her and it has been for quite some time. And he's the like everyone is aware of it, but no one's saying it. Which I feel like there's situations where I knew someone who was like that. And like everyone was aware of it, but them, like you're just like, oh, I'm not being obvious at all, but you're obviously being so fucking obvious about it. I mean, we want to move on to the characters of David and Diane, just kind of like their dynamic, especially with David, because you always need to have one human character that kind of fucks it up for everybody. And David, to me, he's the stick in the mud. He's the one who just like doesn't want to do anything, who's super passive aggressive. And I mean, he's the douchebag character, but yeah, David played by Dylan Moore, and I think he does such a great job at that of making you hate him, it's because of these years of resentment. Go ahead.
He has one of the best deaths in the movie.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Just him getting like teared apart, and you can see his guts coming out. Like that's the best practical effects throughout the whole movie.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of great practical. Yeah, go on.
Sorry, and he definitely deserved what was coming for him.
Yeah,
it was. I mean, when it's it's interesting because Simon Pegg, he's really good at. Of one, it's like, okay, you're introducing these really despicable characters, but he gives them like a brief moment of humanity, and where David is finally like about to say sorry to Shaun, and like, oh, okay,
he's about to get his redeeming moment.
He's getting redeeming, and it's fucking taken away from him, like within seconds, and it's brilliant. And yeah, and you get like one of the most graphic fucking deaths in the movie where he's disemboweled. And then eventually has his fucking limbs ripped off. So it's like, look at your expectations cut out right from under you. Yep. So, any other thoughts on David or Diane?
That's one of the best things that, like with David, and it's one of the best Easter eggs in this entire film is that the names of each of the characters rhymes with their fate. So, like Shaun, like you say more like a British. So Shaun gets reborn. Right. Ed is dead. David gets separated.
Dead. Oh, yeah.
But he is like and if you've never seen it before, he was in a TV show called Black Books, and it is possibly my favorite British sitcom of all time. It only ran for like I think 3 seasons, but it was so good. And to see him, Dylan Moore, in that role replays just this disheveled curmudgeon who just does not give a rat's ass about anybody, and then seeing like the preppy version of that as David is absolutely amazing. And just even during the zombie apocalypse, just seeing somebody who is just such a condescending prick the entire time. But there's also, I think, one thing that he doesn't get credit for. There's a practicality to David too, like the scene with Shaun's mom. It has to be done, and it's cold, it's heartless, but it's a zombie apocalypse. You got to make the tough calls for it. He's a bastard about it, and there's a reason why he should not be liked, but he's also not wrong.
Yeah. No.
One of the things I think that with David is that we all knew a David in college.
Yep.
Well, just in life in general.
Or in life, or like and I think like one of the things that with all the characters throughout this entire film, we all knew a David. We all knew a couple like Shaun and Liz. We all had a friend like Ed. There's and then was it Dawn? The other there's we all
Diane,
these are all people that are universally known to us and like credibly performed, and I think like for a guy like David, he's still like as unlikable and obnoxious and condescending and shitty as he is, he's still like there's still nuance there. Like he's not just like a flat stereotype. Like he's not a two-dimensional character. Like there is something going on there that makes him, function as on a human level.
Yeah. No, and none of the characters, especially the main cast, feels inauthentic. They all feel like real people with real history with each other. Like years, whether it be, positive or, years of resentment. That's definitely on full display. Cassie, did you have something you want to say before?
Well, mainly just the fact that it's a real shame what happened with Diane, not just the fact that she went out there and was basically sacrificed herself for nothing, just to avenge him, I guess, but just the fact that she was so devoted to this man who she knew didn't love her. And it's like, it's understandable, but at the same time, just really upsetting because I keep thinking you could do so much better. And also you did not have to go out there.
I agree with you. If I had to pick like a weak point in the movie, because overall it's like I love the film, but that's the odd part. It's like, why did she do that? But I can guess you can just say that she was just so devoted to that person. I feel like I've heard years later that there's like a comic or something that said that she's alive still, that she survived. Is that what it was?
I think it's
a
like
deleted
DVD
scene.
special.
It's a deleted scene.
Deleted scene. Okay.
At the very end when they're doing the news report stuff. There's a part they cut out where it talked about they mentioned her character's name, that they found her weeks later hiding in a tree, realizing the zombie apocalypse was over, and she was eating David's leg to stay alive.
Jesus
God.
I didn't know. I knew about the tree thing. I did not know about the fucking eating David's leg thing.
I think that's why they cut it.
Yeah, that's a little fucking dark.
She survives.
Yeah, so if you go by the naming scheme for her, Diane is fine.
All right.
I like Diane because of the scene where she was teaching everyone how to act like a zombie.
Oh, it's brilliant.
It's because
great.
That was her moment to shine, like her character.
Yes, it is.
And it was hilarious because everybody was trying to like act like a zombie, and Ed being like a dummy.
Yeah.
Acting like a zombie, it's just terrible.
It's funny because we each get like their own version. Like Liz is very good. She's good. Oh, good Liz. And we go to like who's the next person? Oh yeah, David, who doesn't give a shit. Just being an asshole. And then we go to Ed, who does his thing. Shaun, who's like outclasses Ed. Even Ed's like, all right, that's pretty good. And then my favorite though is Barbara, who just has that like 1,000-yard stare, and she's like, oh my God, Barbara, that's excellent. She goes, oh, I'm sorry, dear, I was miles away. And it's funny. It's that scene works on two levels because one, it's just so fucking good, and I'm gonna give a shout. We're gonna give a shout out to Bill Nighy and Penelope Wilton, who I'm a huge Penelope Wilton fan, not only because of Shaun of the Dead, of course, but because she shows up in all sorts of other movies. But of course, she is famously in Downton Abbey, another show which I will someday talk about with you guys, even if it's just by myself. We'll talk about her. But it's a great, funny scene with Barbara, and then we realize why she is the way she's acting that way much later on in the film. It's that layers of comedy and drama, but moving on from that, I mean, speaking about Barbara, but I also want to talk about Barbara and Philip, and Shaun's mother and his dad, or stepdad. He's not my dad, he's my stepdad. And Bill Nighy's not in the movie very long, but he's you're right, he's so amazing, and he's he's got that dry British humor sensibilities. And for a lot of people, that may or may not work for them. But I just love how blunt he is about everything. Like even like my line, I just love quoting. It's like, it's fine, Barbara. I ran it under a cold tap, and like all that. I mean, people's general thoughts about them. I love that they're so. It's like, how are these fucking two people like fall in love with each other? Where Barbara is so bubbly and loving and warm, and Bill Nighy's character of Philip is seemingly so cold and hard and blunt. Any thoughts on like these two characters and their dynamic and the dynamics with the other, like with Shaun especially?
They're so stereotypically British in a wonderful way.
Yes.
You know, and like they're like he is like Philip is such a stereotypical British father.
Mm-hmm.
Like the British father who like, what do you mean you hug your children? Like, you know, but the thing about that whole relationship, watching Shaun kind of like break down at the prospect of Philip dying.
Yeah.
As much like that scene is so hard to watch for me. Like it was so like because it at first it's so easy to write Philip off as just like what a shitty dad or
an asshole.
An asshole. But at this and it's like there's a line he says like, could you at least bring your mother some flowers and not some cheap posy from a forecourt? Which is like I didn't know what the fuck the guy was talking about until
I know.
was like,
very British.
I was like, oh, he's saying go buy your mother flowers. Don't just pick flowers from someone's like front garden on your way over.
Mhm.
You know, like and yeah, I was just like when I was like, oh, what a prick. But then you realize again, as with everything throughout this entire film, why I think this is a perfect film. You see the pain in Shaun watching Philip die,
and
it is genuine.
Yeah,
like there is like it's like as much as like he never verbalized that he cared about Philip, but he does care about Philip, and it's something like I love that fantasy where he's just like we'll go to mom, we'll take care of Philip, and it shows him Philip and whacks him with the cricket bat.
yes,
you know, but when it comes down to it, no, he doesn't feel that. He does care. It does matter. It does hurt, and it's something that like again this film just handles so well.
You're right. On top of that too, it's like the only time when we hear about Philip, it's always from Shaun's perspective. It's how Shaun describes him and how he interacts with him. And like we get to that emotional scene later on when Philip is dying in the car and where he's basically just, you know, exposing his heart to Shaun, literally probably as well. But, you know, saying that I wanted to be a good dad for you. I just that you had already grown up so much. And, you know, and you could tell like he wanted that. And maybe he also was. Maybe there was times when he was and him and Shaun did have that relationship, but it's that Shaun is kind of maybe unreliable as a narrator in regards to Philip, and I like that about because it just shows how flawed Shaun is as a character. But you're right about that. That's one of those repeated gags I'm talking about. We'll go to this. Plan. We'll go there. We'll kill Phil. They do it like 3 or 4 times till they finally settle on the plan. And it's like, oh yeah, we'll just get rid of him. But then it shows you, fiction is a lot easier to think of than what reality is going to be. It's like just play out that way.
It goes from I'm so sorry, Philip, to sorry, Philip.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Any other from anyone else thoughts on Philip or Barbara? Which again, I love that it's a reference to Night of the Living Dead. We're coming to get you, Barbara. I think it's great. Go ahead.
In regards to Barbara, her and Philip are kind of opposite in terms of their personalities, but also in terms of how Philip comes off as cold a lot of the time, but he also has his moments where he shows like, no, there is a heart down here. I do care about my wife and my stepson. And Barbara has her moments where she seems like, oh, it's all so sweet and lovely and nothing's wrong. But she also has moments like that moment when Shaun comes over and he's talking about how much him and Philip have like not gotten on over the years. And she tells him like, look, he's my husband. And I know you two don't always get along, but he does care. It shows that it doesn't make her like just a cartoonish, lovable mother. It makes her feel like a fleshed out character. And it helps later on when she passes away, and it makes that scene so much more impactful. And it's actually like rewatching it today, I actually got a little watery-eyed when that last scene with her came up.
It's great. Her performance is amazing because of how just while she's selling it and Simon Pegg's reaction to it at the same time. No, it definitely is one of the most emotional moments, if not the most emotional moment in the movie. And there's several. I mean, when we get to the fucking third act, I mean, even before then, we're still in the second act with Philip and things, but that third act when people are dying left and right, and then obviously with Ed later on too. You're absolutely right about that. Austin, did you had something you want to say?
The main thing was, I think the first time the main big surprise for this movie when I watched it was Philip wasn't an asshole. like I think there was there's always the cliche of the stepdad being evil. I mean, it's like the Cinderella, your step parent being evil. And when I watched the movie and when they like, it's like, oh, they'll get rid of him. But like his speech to Shaun and his the way he's talking to him at the end, it really gets you emotional. And even when rewatching it with you, I forgot how, heartbreaking it is watching Shaun having to basically, kill his mom once he finds out she's a zombie.
Exactly. No, totally agree. I mean, both his parents die in the film. He loses his best friend in a way. Any other like thoughts on Barbara and Philip from anyone else?
There's one scene I do really like a lot. Once they get out of the car and they lock zombie Philip in there, and he's trying to explain to Barbara that there's nothing left of your husband in there, and he just and then zombie Philip just turns the music off.
Yeah.
Still one of my favorite scenes.
It's a great scene because it's also, once it's funny, but it's also just referencing that zombies do what they so often did in real life. I mean, just him is just like, I hate loud music. Turn that shit off, which is great. Totally.
Of course, he drives a Jaguar E-Type.
Is that like a super old man British car?
Yeah.
Is it okay?
That is like
one of those cultural things.
Yeah, it's a British car that only like outside of England, like it's like British. The British love it. Outside of England, everyone's kind of like, yeah, no.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because like Ed has like he's obviously attracted to the cars. Yeah, I'm a guy who's like so ignorant when it comes to car and call culture. I'm just like, all right, whatever. But I was like, oh, it's a Jaguar, sure, okay, But it's funny that again, that's like that we referenced earlier, where Edgar Wright's attention to detail when it comes to like the location which he's filming in and examining that and like making it as authentic as possible, which is really cool. But now we kind of get to the last portion of the show, and I just want to go down the line from people, and we'll start with Deadpool, and just asking everyone like what their favorite scene is in the movie. I mean, Deadpool, you like to start? Anything that you had in mind, or like a moment or interaction that just really sticks out to you that makes you laugh, or even could be an emotional moment? Anything in between?
Well, there's one moment I just mentioned, the stuff with zombie Phil turning off.
Right.
But like, I think my favorite part is definitely the contrasting scenes between Shaun's normal, typical like morning routine, being compared to the first day of the apocalypse. Shaun has no idea what's going on; it's just going in the motion.
I just love it how we see two different versions of that, but he's just totally fucking out of it. Like nothing seems out of the ordinary,
which is interesting because that's kind of the theme of the movie. Like how George Romero's all about consumerism, stuff like that for a lot of his movies, but for this one the theme is just going through the daily motions just kind of mindlessly,
because living but not living.
Yeah, that's what the beginning of the opening scene of the movie is. You see all these different people just kind of just going mindlessly through their day, and then you see them pepper throughout the movie later on as the different zombies. Heck, like one of the first scenes, they show people in the supermarket buying stuff, and the cashiers are just standing there mindlessly. The first person you see is Mary, who shows up as the first zombie.
Oh, that's right. You're right. The cashier later. You're wow, nailed it.
Yeah, and and that's also kind of the theme of like Shaun's arc. Is trying to break out of that rut of him just going through the motions.
The routine. Yeah. Good point. No, that excellent. Choice. Ace Rock, go about for yourself.
The scene where they're taking out their Shaun's record collection and trying to figure out how to kill the first two zombies, Mary being one of them. I love it because again, it plays into like Edgar Wright's like hitting commentary about music that he loves.
Yeah, very much so.
Like and it's like no, not that one. That's the first album I ever bought. And he's like, it's shit. He's like, still, and then he throws it anyways. That's I think, I don't know who, someone mentioned earlier that they had the script or read the script, and I was always curious as to whether or not that scene was improv. But I love that scene. That's like my favorite scene in the film. Something that you guys are mentioning, like hidden references. The asshole kid that he works with, Noel.
Yes.
He always like gets phone calls. He's like, "Hey, mate," he's talking to Ed. I love
right.
that.
Yeah,
Later
that's
on,
right.
so much.
later on, someone calls Ed looking for weed during
Mhm.
the apocalypse. That's Noel.
That's right. That's right.
Because Ed is like they sell each other weed all the time, and like that's like it's like they're that's like
Little
that's
subplot.
yeah, but that scene where they're throwing their records at the two zombies, I just think is just like endlessly hysterical. Or like, and they're so slow that they have to like they finally get like a cricket bat and like the other one gets like another like a shovel or something.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, no, you should get the big one. I'll take the short one. And they switch sides. Like that whole sequence, I thought was hysterical.
You're right. Like, it also just shows like, again, he's like, yeah, we're in the middle of the zombie apocalypse, but it's such a irreverent, ridiculous scene because the zombies are so slow. They have time to literally go through the records and like, yeah, throw it, whatever. The Batman soundtrack, throw it. You're right. It's great, but also very, very brutal. Very brutal. That's when they start to brain the zombies. Awesome. What about for yourself? Favorite scene?
I was going to actually say that one, but
it's a good one. It's a good one.
It is a good one. I really like the one where they. I was watching it a bit today. The one just before they were pretending to be zombies with the the volleyball, the tether ball pole kill to with the zombie.
yeah.
And then they walk to the bar and you see those twin zombies and all those other ones.
That's right, with the extras. Those extras, I think they were paid like $50 a day to do that, or like it's like $25 to $50 to do those scenes. But I know when they're like fighting all those, with the tether ball of all things, it's like, yeah, we'll do it. It's like does fucking nothing. Totally, yeah, great. A lot of the action scenes are.
That's rubbish.
Yeah, that's right. No,
stab.
Chris Harris, how about yourself, sir? Any scene or scenes that stand out for you that are your favorites?
Oh man, too many to pick.
Yeah,
there's scenes that I've always thought were funny that are still funny to this day. There's scenes that hit way different than before, like the scene where Shaun's on the bus and everyone's starting to look a little worse for the wear and they're coughing.
Mhm.
Like that gave me flashbacks to right before the pandemic.
Right.
And when I was on a train coming home from Chicago and I'd been reading how like this COVID thing's getting a little serious, like maybe we should start preparing. And I was on the train and people were coughing around me and I was just kind of clenched up like, oh shit. One scene that stands out in particular to me is the scene where a character who we haven't mentioned yet, I'm surprised we didn't earlier, Pete, the roommate.
Oh yeah, Peter Serafinowicz. I totally forgot about Pete.
At the scene where he comes down and starts yelling at the two of them because like they're fuck ups and they haven't grown up yet, which as a kid, I used to hate that character. I was like, yeah, no, I'm with Shaun and Ed all the way. But as I get older, I find myself relating more and more to Pete.
Because Pete's never in the wrong. He's absolutely right. Yeah,
absolutely. Especially because I live with people who are always like loud and abrasive, and I'm just like, oh god, shut up. But that scene is funny because of the dialogue, but also because it's kind of like the ultimate final catalyst for kicking off Shaun's arc of growing up and taking responsibility, telling him like, sort your fucking life out, mate.
Yeah.
It's funny, but it's also a very important part of the plot.
Yeah. I even like what's his line? It's 4 in the fucking morning, or whatever he says.
Yeah, that's it.
So good. Yeah, Peter Serafinowicz, a super underrated actor, voice of Darth Maul, voice of the Darth Maul. He did. Yeah, he's naked throughout the rest of the movie. Yeah, the entirety of the film, he's just butt ass naked.
What happened to your hand? I don't know. Some fucking crackhead bit me.
That's right. Why'd he bit you? I don't know. I didn't fucking ask him. Yeah, that was great. Thunder Lee, what about yourself, sir? What is one of your favorite scenes in the film?
My favorite moment in the scene was one that I made reference to with Back 4 Blood was the jukebox scene.
Oh yeah, of course.
It was to me it was the funniest one, like moment. Like, oh look, Queen is playing, and then the line, "Kill the Queen." What? The jukebox,
right?
Which was hilarious, and then it led to probably the most like funniest, like choreographed, like hitting the owner of the pub, but they're dancing in a way to the music.
They're in sync.
They're trying to turn off the lights, and the lights is going based off the music, and you just see the outside of the lights going on and off.
It's perfectly controlled chaos because everything wrong is going to happen, but weirdly at the same time, everything's in sync of each other. It's like a dance.
Yeah,
and that's why that scene works so well. No, great pick. Casvia, what about yourself? What is your favorite scene or favorite scenes from the movie?
My two favorites, I say, are towards the end. One, when they do the standoff with all the broken bottles and everything else, and they get all in each other's faces, and everyone's personal problems hit the fan, and everyone's shouting, like, now is not the time. But at the same time, they're all about to die, so it kind of is.
Oh, I think you went out.
And then the other part was when they're in. Okay, hang on a second. My thing's red, but it usually goes back to green again. I'm so sorry.
Don't worry.
I was just gonna say when they're in the basement, when they're in the basement talking about suicide and stuff and figuring out, oh, what order do we do this in? And then Liz is like, oh, if I do myself, I'm gonna mess it up. I think I need you to do me. And it just reminds me of the kind of conversations that some millennials and Gen Zers have when they're like making light of depression and stuff. They'll talk about depressive thoughts or intrusive thoughts like it's nothing, and it's just like that kind of desensitization because like they're in the middle of an apocalypse. All they can do is kind of half joke about their suicide.
And I love from off camera you hear Ed, I would also like to be shot or whatever he says. Please. They don't even cut to him. It's just his dialogue coming in there. No, I mean that is a it's a very dark scene, but at the same time is still weirdly comedic. I'll go last, so I'll go ahead and move to Xavier. What about you, sir? What was your favorite scenes in the movie?
So my two favorite scenes were the one when they're like flipping the channel and it's just saying like what's happening, and they do it with like different different TV shows. I thought that was very clever to do that.
We see that like repeated like several times too. Yeah.
And then my other favorite scene was when they go to save Barbara and she's making the tea, and I think Simon Pegg's character, he's like talking to his mother, and he goes as far as saying like Phil,
what if I told you he touched me?
Yeah, what if I told you he touched me? And
that's a great scene.
I just love the timing because she like drops it and then she turns around and he's like, yeah, I fucked up. I'm sorry.
No, you're right. I forgot about that. Good
yeah,
one.
So I really love it. And just his delivery, like even before that when she's like, oh, what about that time you said that? And he's like, he said that? And he's like, motherfucker. It's just his delivery and all that.
Sorry,
I'm actually glad you brought up the TV scene when he's like they're flipping the channels and things. We do see like variations of that throughout the movie. That's actually based on a thing that happened in Simon Pegg's life that inspired the script, and where part of the inspiration for the movie was, what if someone didn't realize they were in the zombie apocalypse until like later? It's happening. And apparently Simon Pegg, at one point in his life, there was this epidemic, like this beef epidemic where these cows in England and the UK got this super deadly disease. And we were like, no one could eat the meat. And it was spreading between all like bovines and shit. And so they had to, it was like on the news. There's this huge story for like a month in UK. I forget, like in the early 2000s or something. And they had to, like, they were, what was it called? You got it, Chris Sayers. What is it?
It was the 2001 United Kingdom foot and mouth outbreak.
That's it. And where they had to literally like kill and burn all these cows because of this disease they had. And Simon Pegg didn't learn about it until it was like at the end, because he was driving by, like, I don't know, I think he was talking about how he was driving to the country with a girlfriend or someone at the time, and all these fucking cows were on fire. It's like, what's happening? And like, you don't know? And he said that's what inspired a big portion of the story, where Shaun is unaware that he's in the middle of the zombie apocalypse. which I think is really, really fucking funny. And probably what happened more than you think, because we're all, especially now, a lot of us are shut-ins. We're all in our apartments, especially during the pandemic. We don't know what the fuck's going on. So that was really clever. Great scene. Vanny, what about yourself, good sir? Your favorite scene or scenes in the film?
My favorite scene, hands down. Take car, go to Mum's, kill Phil. Sorry. Grab Liz, go to the Winchester, have an ice cold pint, and wait for all this to blow over. The last version of his plan, just that such indifference to killing Phil compared to the first version of it, where he goes like, "I'm so sorry, Philip." Bam. Versus by the end, it's like, meh. It's such like just that sorry alone is my favorite line in that entire film because it's so like passionless. It's like, all right, we just got to do it.
All right, sorry. Yep. You're right. Yep. And I even love it when they agree on that, and fucking Nick Frost stands up and goes, "Yeah, boy," and they fucking hit. Like you're in that's fucking great when they're totally in unison. Yep. No, that's a great scene. And again, the editing. Yep. We go back, when we first started talking about the film earlier on in the show, the editing of that, how it's all those cuts, they're quick, but you totally get a sense of it, and it becomes faster paced as they were like, oh yeah, we totally know what the plan is, and like, and that ends with Phil, instead of being reverent of his death, they're like irreverent of it. So yeah, good point. Everything's on full display there: the acting, the writing, and the technical aspects.
Yeah, great. And to me, a close second is when Shaun and crew run into his childhood friend from the beginning of the film. And it's Shaun and his crew and her, the friend and her crew, and they're all the analogous representations of each other.
Oh yes, we see Martin Freeman.
Martin Freeman's absolutely in there too, and somebody else also from Black Books was in there too, like playing like the Diane counterpart too. It works absolutely perfectly, and it's just the two, like everybody just walking past each other and just having to acknowledge. That was good, and we didn't bring this one up either. What's the problem? You never taken a shortcut before?
Oh, when the running gag throughout all the movies when he falls over the fence.
Yep,
oh, that's right.
Yeah, we see that. Like it's either Simon who does it, or it's either Nick Frost. I mean, because Simon also does it in Hot Fuzz too, but he's successful at it. He doesn't alter. You're right. And then Nick Frost fucks it up. No, that's a good point. That's a fantastic running gag between all the movies. For myself, and you guys brought up, I mean, all of these are great, but there's one that it's like a single take. And it's right when the newlywed couple zombies comes into their flat, and like their reaction, they go, oh, like it's so over exaggerated, and they kill him. But it's not that; it's what happens after, because after they killed that one zombie, listening to the TV, and they hear those zombies clawing at the window, and they're like, oh god, and they got to think of a plan. But at one point, Simon, he goes to Nick Frost. He's like, are the zombies still there? And Nick Frost, he's like, don't, let me check. And he literally goes to the window, parts the curtains, and it's in plain view, like fucking Simon Pegg can see him. And he goes, looks at both of them, shuts the curtains, walks back to Simon and goes, yeah, they're still there. Yeah. It's like, we know they're still there. He can see them. Yep. So that scene kills me. And that's like no editing. It's just a single take, a single shot. And I really like that. Yep. Any other just last minute thoughts about the film? I've been talking about this for about nearly 2 hours, about an hour and a half, an hour and 45 minutes.
I genuinely would like to talk about the ending.
Sure.
The overall kind of theme of the film, because I either read or saw an interview with Edgar Wright and about how these characters don't really grow at all. Like you see Shaun in the beginning of the film, towards the end, he's basically the same character, and it's kind of meant to be like a critique on the man-child sort of stereotype that you see in films and even us as a society. And I always disagreed with that sort of line of thinking, because I think that the theme for this one and Hot Fuzz as well and World's End, these are films about incremental little improvements. Yeah. Because Shaun is still more or less a fuck up by the end of the film. And anytime where he's had like these great heroic moments, it's usually met with either he stole it from something from like a bag of chips, or, the scene where he's shows up at the Winchester saying that he gave the zombies, the slip. No, he didn't. He fucked up. Totally fucked up.
Yeah.
But at the very end of the film, he's back with Liz, and it kind of looks like he's still the same person overall. But I disagree, because he has a plan at the end. Like when Liz and Shaun are sitting down saying, what's the plan for the day? He rattles off a plan. And it's not he's not going to law school now, or he's not going to, be the savior of humankind. but he now has a bit more direction in his life, and you see that again in Hot Fuzz and World's End, where like each of the protagonists get just a little better. And I think there's something really kind of positive about that. It's a little bittersweet too, because he kind of still gets his reward at the end for the bare minimum of at least kind of knowing what he's going to do for the day. But that's still a win. And I've always kind of liked that approach better, that these films are about 1% improvement is still a win.
Yeah, his growth is subtle. Like there is obviously growth, and you can even tell certain things in the background. Like you look at their flat; it's much more organized than it originally was.
It's cleaner.
Clearly, he's in a much more honest and healthy relationship with Liz at the very end. And yeah, I mean, they still has like a routine, but he seems to be also happier. Which is good. And Liz seems to be happy. It's not like they're going to go and travel the world for the rest of their lives and do all these interesting things. It's like, no, it's in a movie that is so initially appears unrealistic. Like it deals with very realistic things, and a person is not going to have dramatic changes overnight, but they're going to have these small ones, and but it accumulates and become a better person. So fully agree with you. And he still gets to hang out with Ed at the end, who's a zombie.
He does. And the foreshadowing of that too. Like, why don't you go live in a shed, you animal? And that's how it
that's how it happens. Ed lives in the shed. Yeah. Any other keep going.
Oh no, I'll say like I just really liked just that overall just kind of theming for it too. I encourage you to rewatch the films again especially those like Casper where you only seen it once, and really just see like anytime where he kind of has like this cool heroic moment, it's almost immediately followed up by not really. Or it's like it's a stolen idea or a stolen concept, or he really did fail, which makes it more realistic too.
Yeah, he's just unaware of it at that moment.
And his plan is coming.
Dumb. Yes,
it's a dumb plan.
It's a bad plan. We see at the end, it's like everyone got killed.
He stayed at Liz's apartment, everything would have been fine. It
would have been great. You stay at a high ground from the zombies, could easily barricade them. Any other thoughts? Any last minute thoughts on the movie?
I think the movie deserves to be it's already well known. Like it has its place in horror history.
And comedy as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And, like I was watching one of Eli Roth's horror documentary shows on Shudder, and the episode was about zombies, like in like any zombie movie, and they talked about Shaun of the Dead being like kind of a critique of zombie films, but also paying tribute to Romero's of Dead films.
Yeah.
And I honestly agree. Like, I think without this movie, we wouldn't really have like any other type of critique. Like, there is other critique films before it, but this one was specific for the zombie genre that we never had. Which
keep going.
Which I'm like, I see it, and I think Edgar Wright had such a gem with this one. With doing a combination of both horror and comedy. So for me, I think this is like my top zombie horror comedy film of all time.
I think for a lot of people it ends up being that. And, in order to keep a genre alive, you need to deconstruct it. You need to make fun of it. You can't just keep doing the same things over and over and over again, make them serious. Like, for every 20, 30, 40, 50 zombie films you get, you need a Shaun of the Dead. You need a Zombieland. It's the same thing with any genre. Like, look at the superhero subgenre. It's like, yes, we have all these great films. We have an Avengers Endgame. We have a Dark Knight. But you need a Deadpool. You do need a Deadpool to be like, see, but we can still make fun of the genre and poke fun at it. So, and that's what keeps it alive. That's why anyone says like, oh, this genre is dead. This genre is dying. It's like, it never is dying. It's changing. It's going through a metamorphosis. It's just, it takes another film to resuscitate it yet again. And then you see all these other films.
Yeah.
Any other, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, to build off that, you need to find a new approach to a particular genre in order to keep it alive and allow it to thrive. And that's what this one did. It's a satire of zombie movies. And I think this is a key to making a good satire or a good parody or whatever, is that the genre you're making fun of, you need to do a good job of that, but you also need to make sure that if you take all the jokes out, you just leave the genre trappings there, that it still works as a movie. And I feel like that's what this does. Like, if you take the jokes out, it's still a good zombie movie. And I feel like so many spoofs and parodies and satires or whatever miss out on that, and this succeeds at that in spades.
That's a good point. Very good point. Any other last minute thoughts on the film, or something you just wanted to emphasize or bring up that we didn't cover?
So I do have one thing I want to bring up, which we
Please go ahead.
So a lot of the extras in the movie, especially a lot of the zombie extras, are actually fans of the show Space.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
cool.
when they were making the movie, they put out on the fan website, putting out, saying, "Hey, we need extras to play zombies." So pretty much most of the people you see in the movie who are playing zombies are just people who just have these really big fans of their TV show.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. That's why they were so accommodating when it came to being paid $25 or $50 a day or something. I like that. Yeah. Nice. No, it's a good little piece of trivia there. Anyone else who wants to mention something before we wrap up?
So, kind of being part of the Cornetto trilogy, I never, even though the Cornetto's red, there's so much red in the movie. You can notice even in, it's been a while since I've seen The World's End, but Hot Fuzz, there's a lot of blue you see. But this one, Sean's tie is red. He's drinking Coke. There's so many little things that you just notice that are red. The car was red.
Right.
And The World's End has a lot of green in it, which ties into the whole alien aspect.
Yes.
Yeah. So
it's red for zombies.
Yeah, he has a distinct in blood. Yeah, it knows a distinct color. Each movie has a distinct color palette, or a color is emphasized throughout it. So yes, red, blood, zombies; blue, obviously, cops and cop movies and that kind of thing. And yeah, green, aliens. So yeah, no. I mean, Edgar Wright, whether you like all his films or not, he does have a specific visual style that he adheres to for each thing. There's something aesthetically that stands out about them. So
what was the flavor for each of those ice creams?
I don't know the flavor. I mean, I think red is strawberry, I would assume. Blue, I don't know what blue would be. I don't know.
Green is usually mint.
Mint. That's what I think. Yeah, mint for green. So I don't know what blue is.
Mint. Cornettos are like it's an ice cream cone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like we in the United States, we don't really call them cornettos. We call them, what are they called? Dumb something? Drumsticks. That's it.
Yeah.
That's what we call them.
Yeah. I have it right here. Shaun of the Dead is strawberry. Hot Fuzz is just the classic, and World Ends is mint.
Okay, there you go. It's just the classic flavor, just the regular flavor. We got to do. Alex, welcome. We're just about to wrap up, but I want to give you a moment to talk about Shaun of the Dead. We just could kind of do general, like, what are your, general thoughts on the movie? What do you like about it? And you have a particular favorite scene?
Oh, I fucking love it. I particularly love it when they start throwing the Prince records at the two zombies.
Batman soundtrack. Throw it. Anything else? Yeah, because I know you just came in here. I want to give you some time, of course. We talked about a lot of aspects of the film. We talked about Edgar Wright, our opinions on Edgar Wright. We talked about some of the character dynamics, certain characters that we really love, the editing in the movie. I mean, don't mean to put this all on you, but you can be our final thoughts. You can talk about anything you want.
And everybody should watch it at least once in their life.
Okay. I agree. Well, at least, not only once, but we've even said like multiple times, because
it's been a while since I've watched it.
Yeah. No, it's one of those things that it's rewarding to watch it more than one time. But yeah, if you have not seen it, if those of you who are listening to this third episode of Discourse, you should definitely take the time to watch it. And, I would say check out all of Edgar Wright's movies. Might not like every single one, but you'll walk away with I think definitely a good conversation you can potentially have with someone who's also seen these two, like we all did. I think this was great. I'm glad this was our first comedy discussion, our first zombie movie discussion, what I thought turned out really, really well. I do want to take a moment. So this kind of just wraps up the episode in general. I think we can all, I think for the most part, I get the sense that we all would really do love this movie.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, it's a great horror comedy. It's a great horror film. It's a great zombie movie. It's a great romantic comedy. It does all these things really right. Great cascade writing. So that's good. I want to get to the point where we can talk about something where we don't have a singular consensus we disagree.
Controversial.
Yeah, I know. I'm excited for that. I think it'd be really fun. But I do want to take this time, obviously. But hey, for those of you who have been watching, or excuse me, for been listening, maybe we'll have a visual component someday. But for those of you who've been listening, thank you so much for doing so, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye. 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 Bye bye.